freedom just begun, living large under the sun.
Hi, and welcome to the SmartMAI Consulting Edge Podcast, where we speak with leading business consultants, advisors, and leaders on how to help organizations overcome challenges, navigate change, drive growth, and create measurable results. I'm your host, Dan Mulberry. Universities, laboratories, and entrepreneurs produce remarkable innovations every year. But a breakthrough idea and a successful business are not the same thing. Founder may understand the potential impact of what they've created, but struggle to explain its commercial value. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not the innovation itself. It's determining how to build a company capable of delivering it and finding the route to profitable, sustainable growth. So today's episode is commercializing ideas that can change markets. And we've got a wonderful guest today who spent his career working across those challenges. David Potter is a partner at Sage Partners, where he advises promising health and consumer technology ventures on commercialization, growth, positioning, and value creation in high-impact sectors, including digital health, neuroregeneration, and AI-enabled elder care. I'm quoting from the website there. David's career includes senior marketing and brand management positions with Fortune 200 companies, startup executive leadership, and hands-on work with young medical and consumer tech ventures, as well as 4 years as a senior director of technology transfer at Brown University. He's helped commercialize innovations originating at universities including Brown, Temple University, University of Vermont, and University of Rhode Island. Earlier in his career, David held marketing roles with Textron, General Mills Parker's Brothers Division, and Swarovski Jewelry North America. He later led and advised several health technology ventures, including companies that achieved successful exits. David, welcome to the Consulting Edge. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Dan. I'm happy to be here.
So let's talk about your background and how that led you to what you're doing today. Your career began in consumer marketing and brand management before moving into healthcare technology startups and university commercialization. Tell us how that transition happened.
Okay. Well, I think the root of it all is going back to my days where I was getting my MBA. My real interest was in understanding as in-depth I could as to what consumers really wanted out of not just a product, tactically, but from a total experience standpoint. That kind of art, more than science, always kind of interested me, and that's why I initially started out in consumer products and spent more than a dozen years there, as you mentioned. And had some great times and some successes, but around the turn of the century, I pivoted to healthcare technology because, frankly, my last couple of years with a consumer products company, there was just no sense of accomplishment because, frankly, the products, I don't want to denigrate them, they were trivial, may not be the right word, but basically they weren't really important to people's lives. And frankly, it's kind of easy for me to say this, but kind of trivial. And I was just feeling, kind of so what? So when I had an opportunity to join and kind of oversee the startup of a spin-out company from a state university, a spin-out of technology developed at the university, I said, I don't know a lot about the technology, but I know something about customers and why they buy things and things of that nature. So I took the leap at that point and continued in that vector ever since.
Well, let's talk about that specifically. And that you make a great point. I think we as a society sometimes place way too much importance on things that at the end of the day don't really matter that much, and not enough importance on things like maintaining health throughout your life. It's got such an impact on everything we do. So my question is, working with those established consumer brands, do you have specifics of what that taught you that proved valuable when marketing the more complex medical and scientific innovations?
I'd say a large part of it is, the purely the psychological and emotional aspect of what the experience is of the consumer who is interacting, with the product. And I don't mean to denigrate very good companies, but I felt an awful lot of energy and money was spent on things that just really, it could be X, Y, or Z. Did they really make that much of a difference in experience, important experience for a lot of people? Just didn't click. So that was kind of my desire to say, hey, I'd like to I really want to try with a product, a solution that was more than like an ego boost for the consumer. It was really a lifestyle enabling in a positive sense. So that's kind of the overview.
So obviously a company that's going to direct to the consumer or even through distributors, it's very different than the complexities in the healthcare environment where there are multiple layers of both approval and product development. You're selling not necessarily right away directly to the consumer. Eventually, the consumer benefits, but you're starting with hospitals, doctors, research, various different levels of that healthcare hierarchy. Talk about the complexities of that and how you had to change your approach from consumer products to healthcare products.
Well, you make a good point. I will say there are some healthcare products that do not have to go through formal FDA approval and can be marketed direct to consumers over the counter and so forth, but wide variability in their efficacy and value, though. But to your point, those that are the most likely to be considerably impactful do go through it's a real swamp, frankly, of issues having to do with validating that the products really did deliver the outcomes that they claim to. And it involves typically 18 months or more of what they call a clinical trial, which the technology is put through every kind of testing exigency that you would imagine, as well as at the same time, you're also trying to get a good reading on whether clinicians, doctors will prescribe it. Why not? And the regulatory, well, the regulators permit. So yeah, it's a multifaceted. I'm going to say, lead up to being able to, get something out in the marketplace viably that can, deal with health conditions. So it's and especially, you mentioned earlier, many times academic inventors and so forth only have a very rough idea of what that amounts to, and typically are not well prepared necessarily to deal with several years or more of the preparation to get something into the marketplace. So it's quite a juxtaposition from earlier days when some really creative people within your organization produced something that looked and seemed really neat. We did some focus groups with representative consumers, and if everything, all the vibes were good and all the boxes were checked, it's bang, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to distribute this thing, and away we go. So it's a very considerably different framework to get to the point of being able to get products to the consumer. Yeah.
Well, I know you've worked with various stages of company life cycles. So you've worked with startups, you've worked with reset companies. I gave kind of a one-sentence explanation of who Sage Partners is. Tell us a little more about Sage, who your clients are, and what you accomplish for them.
Okay, well, I'll also say Sage, I actually belong to two consulting firms. Sage is one of them, and the second is called Dark Horse Works. And Sage is the client base there are more established companies, like in the medical side, say Medtronic. And so the work is dealing with, product possibilities within a, already existing successful company. But just because it has been successful, everything's new and different. Dark Horse Works is a focus very much more on younger companies trying to make their way in the med tech and digital health world. So it's, yeah, a lot of similar issues, but it's, again, the environment's a lot different, one versus the other. And it keeps life interesting.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, when working with the Dark Horse clients, obviously AI is impacting almost everything we
Yes.
do. Let's talk about that a little bit. How is it changing the discovery, diagnostics, patient monitoring, market research, product development? I mean, it's touching a lot of different areas. What are you seeing happening with AI in your client base?
Yeah, seen it dramatically over the last 2 years, including with a couple current clients. Uh, to answer your question, it's helping to compress the time considerably to getting the evidence we talked about earlier of it working, for the consumer, for doctors, et cetera. So that time compression can be very valuable. On the other hand, AI is not, as you know, infallible.
Sure.
And it can't be overly dependent on just to answer all the right questions the right way and, to make it do it. So the whole, baking the cake here requires a very informed understanding and use of how AI can and cannot, you know, get questions answered and do things. But it's, I'll say, practically speaking, these days for in medical devices and digital health, if it's not at least AI enabled in some way, it's tends to be looked upon as, last generation stuff, if you know what I mean. So,
Makes sense.
but,
Yeah.
but again, there's the and I'll just say, going back to, I was involved in 2015, 2016 with a startup, which at that time, AI, frankly, was looked at as skeptically by a lot of clinical people. I said, no, that's no. Uh, all these, magical bots and things like that. Our judgment is what counts. And so, but yeah, in less than 10 years, it's been a remarkable, I don't know if conversion's the right word, but it's pretty much what it is. And, but you still need to balance out the human factor and the decision makers and so forth, and get their make sure their concerns are dealt with, and it's not all about the data. It's not, what I'm saying. There's more
Right.
to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great answer, and you actually answered about four of my follow-up questions with that response. So, um, what in terms of regulated health technology, where, given that explanation you just gave, because there is that human element that's still required, and AI's made some tremendous advances. As the platforms have advanced, the capability has really brought us some great things. I saw an announcement recently, I think everyone saw, about the a cancer discovery, or a way to discover cancer that AI found that
Yes.
doctors hadn't found yet.
Yes.
These are things that are really going to benefit people. But, the healthcare, of course, along with financial institutions being one of the most highly regulated industries,
Yes.
um, where does that human, scientific, clinical, ethical, and commercial judgment remain firmly in control? And where is AI taking over?
Well, I would say AI's role probably can it can help cut through a lot of underbrush and cite a lot of approximate precedent uh, for what's been done in the past, and uh, identify where regulatory barriers might be an issue, where um, evidence of efficacy might be an issue. So I would say in many ways it's major benefit. It's not just compression of time, but it's also compression of labor and so forth in working through a lot of what historically has been, you kind of have to wade through a lot of history to get to where, the picture's clearer. So I would say that is the number one major advantage to AI at this point in time, outside of, its specific use for a specific, medical device or something. It's the disentangling of a lot of elements of the rainforest, regulatory, as you mentioned, the insurance side, payer side. Will they pay for it? Why? Why not? All those kind of things. So it's definitely helping in that regard. But folks also have to be careful about taking it again as a never wrong, can solve it all. It's very rare that artificial intelligence is just going to completely nail the holistic solution story. The human element is still, the human expert element is still an important factor.
Well, it's becoming more and more capable on a daily basis, but I still think that, especially in healthcare, one of its biggest strengths is its ability to sift through enormous amounts of data and find things that it's very hard for humans to do manually. And
Yes.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's go back to customer demand. You've emphasized that successful companies must thoroughly understand customer demand hierarchies. Can you explain demand hierarchy to our listeners?
For a patient or a clinician or both or
both?
Okay, well, yeah. So from a patient standpoint, I would say I've seen many, many instances where the assumption of a company creating a device solution is that this is what is the most important thing to the customer, that it gets rid of the discoloration on the patient's arm very fast, very thoroughly, as inexpensive, and who wouldn't love that, right? So many times there are a number of other elements in the patient's total experience that need to be understood and dealt with, because sometimes I'm segueing a little bit here, but one client right now, we're deep into finding out how important it is to a representative body of, in this case, diabetic patients, the use of monitoring devices that penetrate the skin and discomfort versus those that you don't have the discomfort and other factors. And one of the reasons is the difference has substantial price differential factors attached to them. So from the company standpoint, though, it has to know, it's going to be, it's going to be worth it in these price points for this non-invasive approach. It's going to cost more, but it's going to be pain-free, less inconvenience. It's really factor comparison, in-depth factor comparison for the user and also for the clinical team too, that is responsible for the delivery of care. That's the same kind of a holistic understanding of what are all the variables and what boxes do you need to check first, and then column A versus column B. This type of thing takes a lot of sustained inquiry to really do it right.
Oh, I'm sure. And, I think you've really illustrated the difference between something that may just be scientifically interesting and something that a consumer or a customer considers important enough to pay for. So that's a great point. So let's keep talking about that. In healthcare, that complexity that we discussed earlier, there's a person prescribing the product, there's an organization purchasing it, there's an insurer paying for it, and there's a consumer of it. How does that complexity affect the commercialization strategy for a new innovation?
Well, simplistically, you have to check the boxes for all of them. Or if you only satisfy the insurer or the physician, um, uh, chances are patients are not going to engage. And on the other hand, if it's great for the consumer, but has regulatory issues potentially, and other factors like that, or so expensive that insurers balk at it. Once again, it just, you haven't for all the key constituencies in the exercise, for lack of a better term, it's probably not going to work all that well.
Do you see any trends of startups or people who are trying to kick off a new innovation frequently overlooking any one of those stakeholders, or is it different by client?
Well, I would say on the one hand, there is a concern about, mentioned AI being considered as being omnipotent when it isn't.
Mhm.
That's one factor. I would say that a positive trend is patients are becoming more and more well-informed about the efficacy of solutions objectively, and it's has a lot to do with media and so forth helping out that way. Plus, it's technology is helping physicians compress the time they need to spend administratively and other things and be able to work with you on, say you're thinking about adapting this new monitoring technology for diabetes. You can have you don't have to sign off after 15 minutes and go on to the next patient. That kind of time pressure thing still exists, no question, but it's more and more becoming less and less of a barrier, I would say, generally speaking, that way. I can't hear you, Dan. Can't hear you. I'm sorry, I still can't hear you.
So let's talk about why promising innovations fail. Why do technically impressive innovations so often struggle to become successful commercial products?
It can be any number of reasons for that. Sometimes, again, in the process of making a curative device, it probably works perfectly engineering-wise in the lab, but if it's not appropriately tested in real life, with patients, the fact that it excises a tumor is great, but there may be many other complicating issues for the patient. In the diabetic monitoring situation that I mentioned that we're getting at, there's a lot of perceived inconvenience, and secondly, lifestyle. A lot of folks don't like the patches that are,
Mhm.
what I'm saying. So there are these variables that are not related to the clinical efficacy, okay, of the device. Yeah. And then the medical establishments more and more, I think, becoming attuned to that, which is important, very important, because they're the prescribers, for the patient's solutions.
So is that the warning sign that you typically see that people are producing something that they haven't done sufficient market validation? Is that the research just isn't there, the consumer
That's
research?
that's we see a lot of that. Yeah, they really. It's not only a numbers game, but it's the qualitative richness of the issues that they raise and questions that are asked of them that many times don't have the right enough of the right context to really be able to confidently say, this solution has performed the job that our patient wants to have accomplished for different reasons. Yeah. And that's
Gotcha.
what Dark Horse works. It really is a lot of what we do is that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about translating science into a business story. It's obviously there are a lot of moving parts that you deal with. One is the innovation itself, all of the research, the validation, the market research, but actually creating a viable, growing company is a big complexity.
Yeah.
When founders understand their innovation but struggle to explain it to customers, investors, strategic partners, how do you create an effective commercialization story for them or with them?
Well, yeah, and that's not infrequent that
Hmm.
that circumstance comes about. And I'll just add a factor to it. It's not only gets in the way of commercialization, raising investment capital to make it all happen becomes a real barrier as well. It's a very challenging environment right now to obtain early stage development capital for many companies in the diagnostics and device world and so forth. So to answer your question, in working with the founders, you have to go through I'm going to use the term, old-fashioned term, catechism of here are all the important issues that need to be addressed to, on the regulatory side, on the evidence of efficacy, health-wise. You're going to need to clear the bar on all of these in this challenging environment right now to get a product like this into the marketplace. It's a very risk-off environment, which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, it helps promote quality, but it does stifle a lot of otherwise promising
Oh, I'm
technology.
sure. So to that point, when working with investors, private equity firms, venture capitalists, when you're crafting that commercialization story, do you begin with the technology, the unmet need, the customer's economic problem, or the outcome? Where do you start the story?
It's the unmet need slash upside opportunity piece. And then you work back to, okay, this is how this invention uniquely satisfies the users, the physicians, the other key constituencies, primary buckets of, yeah, you got to have nailed this piece. But you bring up an important point. Too often, companies have scientific founders who, I'll just relate an anecdote in just a moment. You'll see what I'm talking about. Are so enamored, frankly, of the uniqueness and genius in the invention that they bury the lead, to borrow a media term, when it comes to this is why it's really important. It's not important that it's a real cool technological breakthrough. No, that's definitely secondary.
Makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
So a lot of these innovations can lead to actually a new product category. Does your philosophy emphasize anticipating the next industry brand cycle and developing best-in-class new product categories?
Well, I'm going to say sometimes that's it. I think more often it's that, say the area of neurology solutions, okay? The brain, which relates to the brain. If often what instigates more progress and innovation in neurological products are a notable success story that of a breakthrough, that a major problem in treating a neurological condition. This breakthrough has happened, and now we're seeing success in it. So it tends to be a bit of a not follow the herd. That's not quite it, but both inventors and certainly investors tend to revert focus to recent wins. It's so things So in many respects, to your question, it's hard to say 2-3 years ahead of time, which is not an unusual cycle time to develop the product and test and all that. By the time you finally get to the end of that 3-year period, you may find that your category, neurology, is no longer that exciting to investors or to big companies who would be licensing the technology from your company, which is the general model these days. It's you'll see young companies not trying to become behemoths. They're going to try to license their IP, intellectual property, to a heavyweight in the market, and let the heavyweight slug it out.
So, David, my final question on the subject: imagine a scientist, entrepreneur, innovator is listening today and believes they've developed an innovation with significant commercial potential. Before building the company, raising capital, or investing heavily in the product development, what's the first question that they should answer?
That they would like to have answered?
They should answer to make sure they're going down the right path. I guess basically the question is, I've got a great idea. Before I invest my time, energy, and money in trying to commercialize it, what's the most basic thing I need to know?
Well, it's the definition of a great idea. Is that purely from an anticipated superiority in, say, dissecting technology, or is it that it's a substitute procedure that now can be done in 30 minutes, and the patient can walk out of the clinic in an hour, as opposed to staying 2 days? So a lot of variables that way, and that's where it gets back again to really understanding all the different pieces in the patient experience, quote unquote, which start with before they go in for surgery and extend after they get out of the hospital, as an example, as well as the understanding what is successful treatment for a hospital system and for an insurance company. I mean, it may be a wonderful solution, but as you're going to expect, if it's extremely expensive, there are some insurers who are going to say, no, we'll stay with something that's less exciting, but you know what I mean? It's more affordable.
Absolutely.
That's reality.
Well, David, this has been great. One of the clearest lessons from today's conversation and the premise of the episode, that innovation and commercialization are two very different achievements.
Yeah.
The compelling scientific story has to eventually become a credible business story, and it has to be supported by evidence, customer demand, disciplined execution, and the right leadership. The organizations that create that lasting value connect innovation with the realities of the market. And I think that you've done a lot to enlighten us on how to approach that. How can people reach out to you and find out more about Dark Horse?
Well, I think you have my email address. And so if people reach out to you, if you want to forward the information, I'd be happy to reasonably get back to people with answers that are appropriate.
Sounds great. And we've got your website, your URL up at the beginning and end of this episode as well, so people can see it there. But David, thank you. This has been a great episode. Appreciate your participation, and thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
Take care.
You too.